Recently, I started the campaign for the 6th installment of the Halo franchise, Halo Infinite, and it's been great to continue Master Chief's quest in the fight for mankind. Playing it feels like it's taking me back to the roots of Halo and therefore has reignited my love of the franchise. While I have yet to complete the game, however, there's one aspect of the game that I'd like to review, and that is the intro to the game. For any video game, the intro is often what sets the tone for what's ahead and can either excite us to continue on, or be so repetitive and dull that we just don't care or don't want to put any effort into starting a new game. While Halo is well known for its cinematic cutscenes, crisp graphics, and stunning landscapes, how does the intro, specifically for Halo Infinite, hold up? Well, today we're going to find out. For this review, I will be analyzing and looking into 3 different categories that I feel are necessary for any good intro to have. Those 3 categories we will look into are the music, the originality of the intro, and how captivating the intro is. We will then give each of these categories a score out of 10, giving us a total out of 30. Then, using these scores, we will come up with a total score to give the intro, which will sum up the overall quality of it. But before I go any further, if you've never seen the intro to Halo Infinite yet, please go check it out first, and then hop back on over here to view the full analysis of it. Let's begin. First, we'll look at the music. Now, to begin, there isn't a whole lot of music in this intro, but when there is music present, it fills us with different powerful emotions. Right away, we hear the faint opera of the Halo theme music play, which sets an ominous and mysterious tone, before cutting right into an action sequence of the Master Chief. For those who are returning Master Chief players, this ominous opera also brings us to a feeling of excitement for the epic journey that awaits. During the fight sequence, there isn't much music, but I think that actually works in its favor. The absence of background music on this 2-minute fight sequence helps us as an audience zero in on the intense fight between the Master Chief and Atriox. Our senses aren't being pulled in other directions from music playing in the background on this scene, therefore helping us pick up on and better understand the critical situation Master Chief is in. Don't get me wrong, music is very powerful and necessary in film. However, the absence of music for this particular scene seems to be perfectly executed by the game developers. Now, as we continue on, we come to what is perhaps the most powerful and gut-wrenching sequence of the entire intro. After we see the Pelican Echo 216's pilot wake up to a ship that is clinging onto life while drifting in space, we see a hologram message from what we can interpret to be his wife and daughter back home on Earth. As the message comes to an end, we see the pilot now has a beard, indicating he's been drifting in space for quite some time now, all by himself. He is missing his daughter's childhood and does not anticipate ever returning home again. But what fills this scene with more hopelessness and regret is the piano in the background.
Show Daddy how big you are. Can you sing? So big. Good. And can you sing?
Mary had a
Good singing. How about I miss you?
I miss you.
And I love you.
I love you, Daddy.
And good. And can you say I can't?
This scene with the piano is barely 30 seconds long, and within those 30 seconds, we feel a sadness for this character we know very little about. If you removed the subtle music on the scene, yeah, it might still reflect a tone of sadness, but the piano amplifies this emotion tenfold. Suddenly, as the pilot's ship picks up a friendly's distress signal, we get some drums slowly building up. As the pilot wipes the windshield of his ship to reveal the Master Chief floating in space, we hear the Master Chief's piano theme, filling us with a feeling of hope and even reverence. We can't help but feel optimistic not only for the Master Chief himself, but perhaps even more so for the pilot. Just another wonderful example of how the writers executed music perfectly to immerse the audience into the world they're presenting. Taking all of this into account, the score we would give for music would be 8 out of 10. The only real thing that we can fault with the music here is that some of the music where the pilot is attempting to power up Master Chief's suit is a bit generic and not as emotionally moving as the other music. But aside from that, Halo Infinite's intro gets high marks for music. Next up, originality. This is always a difficult category to measure properly. With over a century of film and decades of video games now, it's a challenge for any one game to be 100% original in its opening sequence. But while it's difficult to measure, it still is necessary because we as an audience don't want to watch the same repetitive formula to an intro. We like seeing new and unique things, which is a huge reason why we either stick around for more or leave because our interest wasn't satisfied. There are perhaps 2 things from this intro that can be considered original, especially for the Halo franchise. First is seeing Master Chief lose a fight and nearly die to the mighty brute Atriox. For those who are familiar with Halo, Hardly ever have we seen Master Chief lose a fight, and seeing him get pounded by Atriox isn't something we're familiar with. Yes, Master Chief has cheated death many of times, but losing one-on-one to a brute is unheard of. The second aspect that we can give points for originality is the scene of the Echo 216 pilot's loneliness and hopelessness in his ship. Halo 3 ends with Master Chief being alone indefinitely, but at least he had Cortana with him. This pilot had no one with him and was clinging on to the slightest chance of hope that he could return to his family. I can't remember any video game with an opening that displays a similar setting. Very original, and as such, keeps us engaged. Now, there are a few things in this intro that unfortunately do cause us to take away a few points for originality. First is the opening space battle sequence. Yes, it's epic to see the Halo ring right off the bat followed by a space battle, but I feel like we've seen this type of opening before in other video games and movies. This is not to take away how awesome this little battle sequence is, but this formula has been used time and time again. Additionally, when the pilot finds Master Chief floating in space, his armor has locked up and the pilot is unsure if Master Chief is dead or not. Again, this is pretty much how the Halo 3 game starts as well. So, when we look at all of these different aspects, the score we would have to give for originality would be 6 out of 10. Pretty average, not horrible by any means, but not the freshest of intros we've ever seen either. Some things are pretty repetitive, but other aspects are new and original. Finally, the third category, which arguably is the most significant and important. It doesn't matter how original or well done the music is, just as long as the intro pulls us in and keeps us hanging on for more. Although, one could argue that originality and music play a huge role in whether or not something is captivating, but I digress. Does the intro succeed at holding on to our attention the entire time? Is there ever a time when we are bored or uninterested in what's going on? When we look at the intro as a whole, is it safe to say that we are sucked into what's happening right from the get-go? And maybe aside from one or two parts, we are completely immersed and interested in what's going on and in what's going to come next? For example, look at the pilot. Not once have we ever been introduced to this pilot in any previous Halo game. And yet, by the end of this intro, our heart goes out for him and we want to know what his fate will be. For writers to be able to do this in just a few short minutes of an intro is astounding. As for the Master Chief, during the fighting sequence, we can hear the voice of Cortana saying,
If you knew how you were going to die, how would you live your life differently?
As a Halo fan, I could not help but wonder if this was foreshadowing something that was going to happen later on. Again, I've yet to get deep into the campaign, so I have no idea what is going to happen, but the point I'm making is that we start to wonder as players of the game if Master Chief is going to die or not. Naturally, this keeps us wanting to stay tuned in to find out what the ultimate fate of Master Chief will be. This, along with the hand-to-hand combat fight with Atriox and the entire fight sequence in general, keeps us wanting more. The only thing I would fault for being the least captivating sequence would be when the pilot is prepping to power up Master Chief's suit. Up to this point, we've seen so many intense and emotionally intriguing scenes that this final scene, before we start taking control of Master Chief, is a bit boring. We just want to move on and get going on with what the rest of the story has to offer us. Still, when taking this into consideration, the score for how captivating the intro would have to be a 9 out of 10. A very high score that is well deserved. In total, that brings our score for Halo Infinite's intro to be 23 out of 30. However, I do feel that there may be some bonus points to award here. While watching the intro, I couldn't help but notice how crisp and clear the sound was, especially as we watched the scene of Master Chief taking out some of the banished army, fighting Atriox, or the banished ship crashing into the UNSC ship. There's something satisfying about the sound mixer here. I mean, take a listen. For this amazing sound mixing, we will award one extra bonus point for sound, bringing our total score to 24 out of 30, giving us an overall score of Halo Infinite's intro to be 8 out of 10. Overall, we can conclude that Halo Infinite's intro falls into a higher tier quality of intros and does a phenomenal job at setting the stage, setting the tone, and pulling us in for more. Well, that's it for this SMEG review, and if you enjoyed the video, then leave a like and consider subscribing for more content and reviews. And if for some reason you disagreed with my analysis, let me know in the comments why, and what the heck, go ahead and dislike the video if you really disagree. Anyways, thanks for sticking around for another SMEG review.